Kate McDaniel. Today is October 24th, 2018. I am interviewing for the first time Ria Fialka. This interview is taking place at 127 McIver Street, also known as the Public History Lab, on the University of North Carolina at Greensboro campus in Greensboro, North Carolina. This interview is sponsored by the UNCG Museum Studies Graduate Department, and it is a part of oral interviews being conducted for the Patient No More project. So thank you again for joining us today.
You're welcome.
So just to start, I wanted to make sure that you can introduce yourself and maybe just start with your childhood growing up, where you come from, if you're comfortable sharing.
Sure. My name is Ria Fialka, and I was born in Kingsville, Texas. I am the oldest of 9 children.
Oh, wow.
And my dad worked for GE, so after he graduated from Texas A&I, which is now Texas A&M, he got a job with GE, and then like every 3 or 4 years, we moved from town to town, state to state, and so forth. So we didn't ever stay for a full course of grade school, high school, and everything. Each time it was like 4 years, and then we'd move on. So we got a lot of, understood a lot of different aspects of America.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved to Massachusetts 2 days after I graduated from high school. Left a steady boyfriend and all my friends and so forth, and ended up going to a community college in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and stayed in Massachusetts for 13 years. I met my husband at that point. We got married, and I had my first 2 children while I was there. I have 3. I have a boy and 2 girls. And then during the economic crisis, we moved down to North Carolina. Massachusetts had there were more economic slumps there than there were like everywhere else. So that's how my start was.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
So, just out of curiosity, is there anything else about your early life or the period up until you moved to North Carolina that you'd like to expand on, or are you pretty comfortable with?
Well, my father and my mother were type A personalities, and we pretty much came up with that. And so we were always taught to do our best, to strive, to try to make it happen if it could possibly happen, so that that background has helped me over the years, because we just kind of roll forward to make things happen in order for our lives to be okay.
Mm-hmm. So, moving on from there, are you comfortable talking about your personal medical experiences?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So, for this amputation that I have, basically about 15 years or so before any of this even became a fact, I had ankle problems. Actually, I just thought I was lazy and did not like to exercise. My kids ran and they did all these things, and they'd come to visit me. They'd want to go for walks, and I'm like, ugh, So I went to doctors and got checked, and they never could find anything wrong. So in August of 2009, I was living in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I just couldn't walk. So I was pointed to a orthopedic clinic that dealt with a lot of athletes and Olympians and people like that. So they were well known, and they were very good. So I had several doctors examine me and talk about it and everything, and then they finally sent me for an MRI. And when I finally saw the doctor after the MRI, I said, "Do you know what's wrong?" And he goes, "Yeah, I do, but I don't know why you have this." And I said, "Well, what is it?" Because I'm thinking cancer or something like that. And he said that I had avascular necrosis, which means that I lost the blood supply to the weight-bearing bone in my ankle, which is the talus, which is about the size of a ham bone, if you ever have seen them, about that tall, about that big around. And over the course of all these years, it started decomposing and being unable to carry my weight. And it's very rare in ankles. It's mostly seen in hips, especially older people when they fall, and then they break that blood supply, which the blood supply is almost like a vein. At least from the picture I saw, that's what it looked like. So it looks like it could easily break. But usually when you see it in ankles, it's traumatic. It's a car accident, a skiing accident, some sort of thing like that that would cause a break. So because I didn't have any of those things, you know, it just was never picked up. Not only that, MRI shows dead bone and x-rays do not. And so that was a big surprise. So they sent me to Duke. I saw Dr. Richard Nunley, who was the head of orthopedic surgery, I guess. And this was his specialty. And he's a great, great guy. And he examined me, and they did all these CAT scans or whatever it was that they did, and offered me an idea of, well, instead of doing anything really severe at this point, why don't we start out with a core decompression? And he says that's like if you aerate your yard in the fall, then in the spring your grass grows up. So it was an attempt to build this back up so that it would come back again in lay terms. And if Dr. Nunley ever sees this, I'm probably saying it all wrong, but that's what I got out of it anyway. So we did a core decompression, and that was basically every surgery I had from that point on was 3 months non-weight bearing, and then an additional 9 months of healing before they were able to tell if it took. And so that first 3 months was really something else, because that was my initiation into being handicapped, even though I still had my leg and all of that. Because I was non-weight bearing, which meant I could not walk on it, so I had to get a knee walker and learn how to use that. I ended up moving out of South Carolina and moving in with my brother and his family in Hickory, North Carolina for 3 months. So for somebody that's a type A personality and usually taking care of themselves, to have somebody help me get down a couple of steps from the kitchen to the garage, or to get into a car, pick up the knee walker and put it, you know, in the back of the car, or whatever it was very revealing to me that I don't really care, or I didn't at that time, to have that happen. I fought that for a good long while. And since my brothers and sisters are the same as me, they fought right back, you know, trying to help me and say, you know, we need to do this for you. And they were great. My family was really, really supportive. My kids were off on their own at this point in time, and so they were in different towns, and they were worried and so forth, but it worked out okay. So at the end of those 3 months, everybody in the family wanted me to go live with my mother and father, because they were older and everybody was concerned. And I had a sister that had some birth defects and was living at home with my parents. So I moved into Hickory to their house, and then very shortly thereafter my father died, and then my mother we found out she had dementia, and you know, so we had this roller coaster thing going. So 12 months goes by and it didn't work. So then a month later I go in for an ankle fusion, and same deal, 3 months non-weight bearing, and then an additional 9 months. And at that point, I'm the one living there taking care of my mother and so forth. So everybody in the family had to really kick in and help. And 12 months later, that didn't work. So then a month later, the third surgery comes up, and that was what they call a hind foot ankle fusion, where they go in through the back, and I'm not quite sure how different it is, but that's what they do. And when they did the surgery, and they got ready to, there's a plate that they have to put on and then put the skin back over it. There wasn't enough skin, so they had to call in a plastic surgeon. He had to do a skin graft on my hip to replace that. And Ben, so I woke up to that. Oh, by the way, not only did you have a, hind foot ankle fusion, you also lost some of your skin on your hip, and don't get it wet. All those, it's so weird the way they do all that stuff. So at this point, my son and daughter-in-law and my new grandbaby came down from Washington. I was in Greensboro, and my daughter-in-law, the baby was just really little, and she was taking care of me and taking care of him and all that. And I ended up with a cellulitis, which is some sort of a, I'm still not clear, bone or blood disease of some sort, and ended up back at Duke in the hospital. So she drove me back and dropped me off there, and then she went back to Washington, D.C., where they were living. I guess I really didn't know until after I went through all these things how fortunate I was in every different turn of the road, because the cellulitis could have been really bad. And I was in the hospital for like a week, but they managed to get it out. I ended up having to have home health when I got back, and a daily IV, and all kinds of stuff, wound vac and everything else. And so there are a lot of aspects to healing when you're an amputee. There's a lot of aspects of what they do and how they do it, and it's just amazing. It is just amazing how much they know and do. I guess we have we are the recipients of the knowledge that they've had for years and years and years going through this. I believe, if my history is right, the first prosthesis that was ever made was by a man by the name of Hanger, and that's where we have the Hanger clinics that do a lot of prosthesis and prosthetics and so forth. So after that period of time, which was the worst part, that time when I had the cellulitis and so forth, and they had done the skin graft, really was bad because I had to keep going back to the plastic surgeon before I could go back to my regular doctor. And every time he unwrapped my leg, the skin was not healing, and it was like just really bad, so it just wasn't working. So another 20 days goes by and takes me back in, and they took my calf off to use as the skin for this issue that they had. And as you know, the calf is not a real aerated section of skin. There's it's thick, it's muscular, and so forth. So during the course of time, it kept rejecting layer by layer by layer. Of course, not being a medical person, I didn't know that that was the process. So one day I'm sitting there, and they take off that thing, and it looks like they take off the bandage, and it looks like a 7 or 8 inch steak that got burnt on the grill, black as the ace of spades. And I'm just sitting there crying, and the doctor says, well, what's wrong? And I said, this is never going to work. And he goes, well, this is just the process. And I thought, well, it'd be nice if I'd known that, But anyway, that process went on and on and on and on. And that was probably the hardest part of this whole thing, is because I was home health forever, in bed forever, and so forth. So after that, 3 months, 9 months, it didn't take. And so Dr. Nunley said, well, perhaps we could do something else. And I said, I really think you just need to cut it off. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to keep going in surgery. I don't want to keep getting all these drugs. I don't want to, be unconscious, do all those things. I just want to have a life. And I didn't know anything about amputation, really. I just knew that was the other choice. So a month later, that's what we did. I got an amputation, and it was a learning experience for my entire family, especially for me. But I had a lot of support. I had a lot of family support. I had everybody in my family was worried to death that one of their kids was going to get this. So every time somebody had an ankle twitch, they were calling me and asking me what all my symptoms were and all that. And so I told them my story. I said, just tell your doctor so that they're aware and so forth. So because my father apparently had it too before he died, because he was in a boot and all those kind of things, but I never realized that he and I both had the exact same thing. So I had, excuse me, at that point I'm living in Greensboro, and I had a family that just went over and above. They drove me back and forth to Duke and came and got me for doctor's appointments, and even my hairdresser, God bless her, I got it right over there for my hair appointment, and then she took me home. She just left her little shop and she took me home. So, excuse me, I met a lot of people with a lot of really good hearts during that period of time. And then I got to start the process. Do you want me to go from there?
Sure.
Okay. Since I was at Duke, I initially saw a prosthetist that was in the same place that Duke was, and they got me started on everything. And when I went home from the hospital, it's like you have to heal for 5 or 6 weeks before you can get a prosthesis. I mean, I thought I'd get the surgery and then they just put on this leg and off I'd go. You know, that shows you how much I knew about anything. And so I had a really nice fellow there, and like 5 or 6 weeks went by, and I went and I had my appointment, and he had built me a prosthetic, and that was weird, getting that prosthetic on my leg. And there's a there's a whole process for that too. It's just as technical as anything under the hood of a car, you know. I mean, there's all kinds of things to do. And there were double rails there, and I stood up. It's just amazing what goes through your mind and your heart and everything else when this happens. So I was afraid to put any weight on it because I thought it would hurt. And it hurt a little bit, but not too bad. And so I started walking down that double rail thing, and managed to get up and get back, and held on to it some and didn't hold on to it some, and so forth. So I got sent back and to Greensboro, and started learning how to be an amputee and how all that stuff works. Initially it was a walker, a cane, and a wheelchair pretty much. And the cane really came a little bit after the walker, because you just got to, your body has to learn, harden up. It's just like if you go barefoot with your feet have to get used to walking around on the dirt and on the concrete and everything else, and harden up, and that's kind of what happens with an amputation. And not to say that it was easy, because everybody's amputation is different. Everybody has weird glitches in their skin and in their bone structure and everything else. And at the same time, you're atrophying and atrophying and atrophying. And so the size of your leg changes, and then you get all wobbly in your prosthesis, and you start building up blisters, and there's just a whole thing that happens when you go through all that. And when you're the first one around doing that, you don't know what to expect. I changed to a prosthetist that was in Greensboro instead of having to drive back and forth to Durham all the time. And I got Jeff Smith, who was with Advanced Prosthetics and Orthotics, I think is what it was. Eventually, Hanger bought it, and all those people are still there, and they have been a lifesaver for me. I'm sure I was driving them crazy on a regular basis, because I wanted to know why. I felt like a little kid, you know, why is the sky blue, you know, that kind of thing. But they worked with me really, really well, and I had allergic reactions to some of the plastics or whatever it is that they put in there. I had blisters. I became a blister expert and so forth. And at the same time, I'm trying to remember how I found out about the amputee support group. Somebody, I think Jeff might have told me about the amputee support group. I also got a physical therapist in Greensboro that is a expert on amputations, Robin Waldron, and she's been doing this for about 20 years. She's also a doctor of physical therapy and teaches at a couple of colleges. And the first time I went to her, you know, she was like, it was funny because most people, they don't even want to ask you about your amputation. They don't want to offend you or anything like that. She goes, okay, we'll take that off. Let's see what it is. And, you know, very matter of fact. And at that point, I had already talked to Jeff, and he had mentioned that there was an amputee support group. And Robin said, you know, what are you doing tonight? And I said, well, why? She goes, well, there's an amputee support group. I said, oh, I'm already going. I was planning on going for that. Well, she was the one that started it. She's the one that got people going, and she's not like a member. She's just our like monitor, you know, sponsor. She just takes really, really good care of us. They have a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and that whole deal. So I went in there, and it was very close to Christmas, and they were having their Christmas party, and there was all these people there. Of course, they had their spouses as well, and I thought, well, this is interesting. So I started going, and I've been going ever since. I am currently secretary of the group, and we have really worked to build it up to get more people to come, because there's a lot of need in this town. There are people that have amputations. You cannot believe how they got them. You just can't believe it. Some of the most horrible stories you've ever heard of, motorcycle accidents, car accidents, drunk drivers, you know, somebody jumping a curb and going into your yard and hitting you and taking off your legs, you know, and all those kind of things. So I just have a little old below the knee amputation. And so I have learned that I am very, very blessed, because yeah, it gets sore, it hurts, my back hurts, you know, it affects other parts of your body, but I can walk, I'm ambulatory, you know, I can drive, I can work, you know, I still have my life. I just don't move around as well as I used to move around.
Well, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
sharing that. Is there anything that changed about your life after the amputation that surprised you? Anything you really weren't expecting?
Well, I didn't expect all this to take such a long time to heal and everything. The funny thing is that I never thought about it at all when I told the doctor to just cut it off. I never considered it, I just said it. And the process surprised me. I didn't know how the process worked, and it surprised me. The dedication of the prosthetist, the physical therapist, the doctors, everything was just, you know, unbelievable, just unbelievable. Those people have a special place in heaven for all the things that they do for all of us. I was surprised that I didn't know there was all kinds of different prosthetics you could get and so forth, and some work better than others. I didn't know that people got amputated above the knee and below the knee and up at the hip, and you know, all those kind of things. Just the process was just, it's like going back to school and learning something like that. And I was also surprised that I couldn't just make things happen, because my body had to heal before it was going to do anything. It was more in charge of me than I was of it.
Is there anything else about your experience with medical personnel that you'd like to go into? You mentioned a few different experiences that were both positive and some that were a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, I tell you what, I have a great respect for the medical field. These people have gone to great lengths to learn what they need to do, and a great expense as well. And they are so dedicated and focused. If you take the prosthetists and you go in there and just think about this, it's like they have most of their all their people either are ambulatory and they have braces or something like that, or they're amputees. And so they have to take somebody like me that says, well, I've got this and it kind of feels like that and this and that, and somehow or another from that jumbled mess they have to come up with what's really going on, and they have to figure out a way to make it work for you. And that is just, I was talking to my daughter the other day who's a physician's assistant, and I said, you know, it's like a doctor has to listen to people from every walk of life and how they speak and everything else, and become that detective that can pinpoint down into what's really wrong and come up with a solution. And we expect so much of them, and they do such a great job. The physical therapist, you know, when I started going to physical therapy, I couldn't understand why I had to stand straight up, close my eyes, and just stand there, until I started going back and forth like that, because it's balance issues. So they know all of these things, and they know everything about the muscles and what happens and so forth. And I just have great respect for them. And the nurses and the home health people, they have very much compassion, and everybody's just, people in the medical field are just really special.
So you also mentioned that in joining the amputee support group, you became secretary and been very involved. How long have you been a part of that group exactly?
Well, let's see. I got my amputation in September of 2013, and I went to my first meeting right at December, so 2013. So it's been, what, 5 years or something like that. And I really enjoyed it. It has grown and built, and a lot of people that come in as amputees initially are quiet and reserved and, you know, tentative and so forth, and I totally understand that and feel that. So I feel like my job and Robin's job is to pull them out of their shells a little bit and let them get back into real life and be productive and all that, and let them make choices and decisions and so forth. So we try to have some social time every few months. The hurricane kind of messed us up this last time, because we were going to have a day out at Lake Higgins, and we're getting ready to go out to dinner together as a group and so forth. So we're trying to become another family for them, and it has worked out really well. I think that our numbers have built up, and we really we get a lot of people coming back and back and back. So it's worked out really well. It's very good for me. I always feel so good when I leave there after seeing people and talking to people and hearing things go on. Plus, it's also very instructive. Robin gets people to come in and give stories and tell about the latest thing they're doing or trying to work on a project, you know, and it's just always been very interesting.
Have there been any changes within the organization, or any trends of growth or development that you would like to talk about?
Well, when I first got there, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of people that were going there, and most of them were quite a bit older than me, and we had some lovely people that were there, had been, you know, like the president had been the president there for like 18 years and so forth, and they were really good and sweet people. And as more people started coming, we just tried to branch out a little bit, and it's been it's been interesting for everybody. And the other thing is that we get people coming in, kind of like me, where they just got the amputation. And that's where our growth started. But it's not necessarily people that have had amputations for 10 or 15 years that suddenly show up. It's people that have had amputations and somehow or another they find out about us, and then they come, but then they stay, and they continue to stay, and they contribute, and they're so interesting. And one night, Robin got delayed somewhere, and the speaker didn't show up. So we went around the room and talked about our prostheses, and everybody took theirs off, and we got to see how everybody's looked, and because they're all different. Every single one of them is different. And I started telling them about these great Band-Aids I found for blisters. You know, it's almost like a bunch of women at a quilting bee, and just chit-chatting and talking and so forth. So it's good, and we're friends. You know, we have a lot of friends in that group now.
So overall, if someone who had never heard of the organization asked you about it, and you had to sum it up briefly, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that it's a tremendous support group. It's full of information, especially when you don't know any of this stuff that's going on, and that they can make calls, ask questions, find out information, and so forth. And so we are currently working on a website for people to be able to access and see when they're trying to look. One of our strategies is to try to draw as many people in the Triad area as we can into the meetings so that we can help any way we can. And so we have people that come. There's people that come with their caregivers. The caregivers get them there and so forth. And there's people that come with their a member of their family to drive them. There's people that come on SCAT. SCAT bus drops them off, and then they call and they pick them up afterwards. And the families are just as involved as the amputees are. We have girlfriends and boyfriends and fiancés and all kinds of different things, and these people have taken a huge hit in their lives, whether you're the amputee or the other, the family, significant other, boyfriend, whatever. And it's really a shock. It's a shock, and you have to adjust to it, especially if it happened as an accident or something like that. Mm-hmm. And our goal is to help people understand, and also to let them know they're not alone, So we are trying to get together a class for people that want to be peers for when people are in the hospital and they just had the amputation. Because that happened to me while I was at Duke. A man came in and sat down, and he had on long pants. And he was talking about the amputation. He says, well, I have an amputation as well. And I had no idea. I mean, he had long pants on, he looked like he was walking regular and all that stuff. And then I just must have asked him a million questions. So, because you don't know what you're looking for or what to expect.
Do you feel like there are enough organizations or sources of help for people with amputations in Greensboro?
Well, we are the only, as far as I know, we're the only group. And the answer to that question is in the middle, yes and no. Because once we get up the website, people will be able to go on and just, search for it in Google and find it. I think that's been a soft spot on us at this point, but we now have somebody that knows how to do that. And so, because none of us are technically skilled to do that, there's not a lot of younger people there. There are a few. And so all of the technical aspects of the internet and so forth are just, it's what we learned as we went, not like you guys that, probably got it when you were 4 and can do anything, So, yeah, and we're getting we have brochures made, and we usually leave those at the doctor's offices and the prosthetist offices and physical therapy and places like that, so people can have that to be able to look, and it's got phone numbers and they can call and so forth. And so we're working, to answer your question, we are working to build up our presence in the Greensboro area so that people know we're here and that they are aware that there is a resource for them. And we're hoping to get into, like, you know how they have little festivals and things like this around here, to have a booth and a table and brochures and t-shirts and stuff like that, so that even if there's not amputees there, people that might know amputees there can grab some information and give it to them and help them out, because it really made a huge difference in my life. I really don't know how I would have gotten through everything as I did, because I had all the same bumps in the road that everybody else had, but I had a place to go and ask the questions, or pick up the phone and ask the questions, and that makes a big difference. I mean, I had a man stop me when I had just been it was that first winter, like in January, February, I was at Walmart, and I was in that little electric cart, which now I just walk around, and the man said to me, I noticed that you had an amputation. He says, my father has an amputation, and he's just given up hope. Do you have any help, suggestions, and so forth? So I whipped out a brochure out of my purse, and I told him about the support group, and that it was really good, and if you could get him to come, that it might encourage him and enthuse him, and so forth. Well, he never showed up, and I was really sorry about that. But that's how we started trying to, because everybody's had people stop them and ask them. And there's a lot of people that don't even want to look at it. They look straight at your eyes, and they don't want to hurt your feelings or offend you by looking at the amputation. Myself, I have 7 grandchildren with 1 on the way, and the oldest grandchild is 6. So I was just recently in Florida visiting one set of grandchildren, and my youngest granddaughter there came up, and she would, when I was asleep, she'd pull the covers back and she'd start rubbing my leg and go, Nunu, Nunu, leg, she doesn't know how to say all of that stuff. But then my grandson calls it my robot leg, he just loves my robot leg. And so, and then my granddaughter, the first summer that I moved to a place where we had a pool, and I went to the pool, I was afraid. I was so afraid. My sisters were there helping me move in, and they said, let's go to the pool. And I sat in my room for 15 minutes. My heart was just racing, because, you take your leg off and everybody can see it, and there's children in that pool. Am I going to scar them for life? What are their parents going to think? The whole deal. But it worked out okay. My sisters wouldn't take no for an answer, and we did it. And as soon as I did it the first time, I felt better. So then later the grandkids came, and my little granddaughter sitting on the steps with me at the shallow end of the pool, and she goes, Nunu, where's your leg? And I said, well, honey, they had to take it away. She goes, well, don't worry, it'll grow back tomorrow. They're so sweet, they're so open, and all those little kids that were at the pool were looking, and and then my grandkids started getting with them, and then they got a little bit bolder to come over and look and so forth. So it's actually exposing them to something that's actually part of life. So.
How would you describe most public experiences you've had relating to the amputation?
Well, actually pretty good. Most people are pretty amazed at what, in my experience, they can't believe I can do this or I can do that or whatever. And I never think in those terms. It's just that's part of life, just like before, you have to clean your house, or you have to dig in the dirt for your garden, or whatever you have to do, drive your car. So it's, you adapt. It's just like, the polywogs or whatever in the water that eventually adapt into frogs. You just do other things to make up for it. There's a lot of things and devices that we can use to help us. currently I have gotten smart enough to get one of those, it's a grabber, I think is what it's called. So when something's on the floor, because my back hurts a lot of times, I just pick up that grabber and pick it up, and gotten pretty good with that. Have to hide it when my grandkids come because they want to play with it all the time. I have a left foot accelerator in my car that is portable, so I can move it from car to car, which I've had a lot of interest in that from other people. And I have brochures for that, and several of them have bought them for their cars, so they don't have to pay a big amount of money to have their car outfitted. They can just buy this and then just move it from car to car. So I just think that it's just been, what it has been is it's been an eye-opening experience for me. People are so kind and so nice and so interested and helpful, and I'll hold the door open for somebody that's got a baby carriage and she's wanting to hold it for me, and I'm like, I can do this, you just go take that baby carriage and go through, and stuff like that. People are just really nice.
Mm-hmm. So my next few questions are also related to sort of changes in everyday life, such as you mentioned the car adjustments. Have there been any other types of adjustments you've had to make because of the amputation, such as in your home?
Yes, I have. And it's been a growing and learning process. When I first had to take a shower, that was scary. I was living in a house that I was renting, and they didn't have any, no handicap devices at all. So I had bought a chair, a shower chair, and it's just a little white thing with legs on it, and it's kind of waterproof, and it has rubber on the bottom of the leg so it doesn't slide around. So I had to kind of get myself into the shower and onto that chair. And it wasn't the best way to do it because I did have a couple of falls, which are not fun in the shower. And but as time went on and I got into my own house, I was able to do some adjustments. I have a stair lift. It's a chair that's electric, and I can go up and down the stairs, which is helpful. I mean, I can go up and down the stairs without it, but when I have to get stuff upstairs, I can either put it in my lap and go up, or I can put it on the chair and use my remote and send it up. So that, because that was really, really hard. And initially when I actually broke my leg, the leg that's got the amputation on it, and I had already ordered the stair lift, and I called my friend that was going to put it in, and he dropped everything, and the next day he put it in. So because otherwise I would be crawling up and down the stairs. A lot of times you just have to do what you have to do. I had bars put in the bathroom and shower. Well, not in the shower because I had all this tile, and but right outside of it. So I've been able to utilize that. Got a different shower chair that. Two of the legs are inside the chair, two of the legs are outside of the chair. It's much sturdier. It has a seat that slides in and out so that you can get in and out. So that's been huge, huge, huge. I can't stand for really long periods of time, so I have a stool in the bathroom when I want to do my hair, my makeup, whatever. I have a wheelchair that's only used upstairs in my bedroom. And I changed over in my bedroom from carpet to hardwood floors, because pushing a wheelchair on carpet is like pushing it in sand on the beach. It's not easy. And let's see what else. I have a chair. I have a stool in the kitchen. So if I'm baking or I'm doing dishes and all that, because on top of everything else, there's some other parts of my body that have suffered because of this amputation. My back and my hip, my neck, and so forth. So anything I can do to alleviate any stress and strain on that is, I try to come up with something to do. And then for years, my kids would have somebody, one of their in-laws or somebody would have one of those lift chairs where you push the button and it helps you stand up and get up and all that stuff. And I said, no. So finally my third calls me and says, we've got this, do you want it? And I said, you know what, I'm just gonna say yes. Because everything keeps happening. Every time something goes on and it happens, I'm so surprised. And I thought, I just need to be prepared. So I was a recipient of this chair, which has been really good, although I haven't used it to get up, but you can lay back and it's just nice. What else do I have? I don't know, I just have to be very careful about layout in the house. All amputees do. It's easy to trip. When you have an amputation on your leg, if you think about it and you got your foot on the ground, you can feel there's something underneath you. You have that sensation going from the bottom of your foot to your brain. When you have an amputation, there is no sensation at all. There is no way for you to know what you're doing unless you're totally aware of what's going on around you. So if you're in an unfamiliar place and you're not looking, you could easily trip and fall. You could take a step and not know the step was there and fall. I've done every bit of that stuff. And a lot of times you can't recover the way you can when you have both legs. If you start to fall, if you think about times you started to fall, you've got both your hands, both your legs, and you can manage to disperse your weight or whatever and catch yourself. It's not as easy with amputation. I took several falls this past year, and the last one I took was a real humdinger and I'm still recovering from that, and it's been 2 or 3 months. But I got caught on an area rug. I was walking fast, because I always walk fast, and this foot got caught on an area rug, and it threw the dynamics of my body off. And, I went sideways and smashed into a glass wall and, all kinds of different things. And so I try to be careful in my house, that I don't have anything I can trip over, and that I keep areas clear and so forth. And of course, in my house, I'm much more familiar with what's going on. So I can't think of anything else that I have for, a knee walker. I have a knee walker at the bottom of the stairs, because when I get up to my room, I take my leg off. And if I need to get something downstairs afterwards, I'll take the wheelchair out to the chair, take the chair down, and at the bottom of the chair is a knee walker. It gets me through the house for whatever I have to get. So that's pretty much everything that I have.
Okay. How long does it take to put a prosthetic on, typically?
It doesn't take any time at all once you've been with it for 5 years. When you first start, it's weird. There's different kinds, and the one that they usually start you with is, and I know I'm going to say this wrong, I think it's called a pin in a bucket or something. You have a liner, and the liner, at the bottom of the liner, there's this big screw that's been set on there. And then the bucket is the part of the prosthetic that looks like skin color, and it's kind of a hard plastic or whatever it is, and there's a hole in the bottom of that. So you stick your leg inside that, and you stand up and you press 3 times for it to click, click, click so that it catches. So when you first start that, you might not stand straight enough, it might go in an angle and all that stuff. It doesn't take a long time, but once you get a prosthetic and you've had it, it's just like you pull up the liner you put on your prosthesis, you make sure that it's smooth and walk away.
Okay.
It takes no time at all.
So my next few questions talk about media influences in relation to prosthetics and disability. So how do you feel about portrayals of these topics in TV or movies or any other form of media?
I don't find that there's that much on TVs and movies about people with prosthesis. You see much more of people that have things like autism or Down syndrome or, Asperger's or something like that, especially as the children are growing up, and you really don't see things where kids are walking around with double amputations or adults or anything like that, maybe once in a while. So I know that the city of Greensboro developed a committee to try to go through, and I don't know all the ins and outs of this, but I know at least downtown, all the sidewalks and so forth, to try to make sure that they're set for people with disabilities and so forth. So it's nice to know that your civic community is taking those in charge. But as far as TV and movies, the only prosthesis I ever see are when you get the Marvel people that are, Captain America or one of those guys, and they've got some sort of prosthetic gun on their arm or something like that. You just don't see, I don't see it anyway, unless I'm just not watching the right movies.
Is that something you would like to see?
I would, because that's just as much part of our life as anything else. You do see always depicted as elderly people in a wheelchair or maybe in a walker or anything like that, but it's almost like, you expect old people to be in wheelchairs and walkers, and it doesn't go into any of the things that make up having to live a life with limb loss of some sort. And it doesn't matter whether it's your arms or your legs, it's still, and it happens. I'm surprised, I'll tell you what I'm surprised about, is how many people have limb loss and how many times a day it happens and how many people lose them in car accidents. I mean, I guess I was naive. I just never thought about that. And it happens all the time. Diabetes, there's different skin diseases or maybe even cancer and stuff. There's all kinds of reasons that people lose their limbs, and we're all really blessed that they come up with solutions for that. But they should show that. They should show that in the media. And they do some really great things on the news, but if they're doing a family home show or something like that, they should at least have somebody or a neighbor or, an aunt or an uncle or something,
Do you ever feel like there are stereotypes associated with people with disabilities?
I really have never thought about that. I think that there's stereotypes of some different people that have different illnesses, but as far as disabilities, I just haven't run into that so much. There may be, but it hasn't done, I haven't been affected by it.
My next questions are related to reflecting on overall experiences that you've had. So, for example, with prosthetics, how do you feel overall about current technology and prosthetics and how they are changing recently?
Well, technology on prosthetics is, to the moon. They can do all kinds of things. And it's exciting and great. Now the problem is that Joe Blow down the street doesn't get it. The insurance companies won't pay for it. They do a lot with the veterans and with the people in the military. Thank God that they do, because that's where the knowledge comes from when they're trying to figure out how to take care of this particular problem and that particular problem. But a lot of stuff is computer generated, and the insurance companies are getting worse and worse about paying for anything. And then when you get into Medicare, it kind of gets even worse. The people that are on Medicare are usually the people that are becoming from not being low income to being low income, and not being able to afford, a big chunk of several $1,000s to pay for their portion of the prosthetic. And that needs to change. And also the fact that they will deny us the more, the newer processes, because they don't think we need it, or it's too expensive, or whatever. And how do they determine what we need, what kind of lifestyles we have, Some of the people in our group have what they call sea legs. Now, I'm not an expert about that, but I know that some of it is, it's not just nuts and bolts. There's some brain in it or something like that. So they've at least got that kind of stuff. But, for example, on mine, or on a lot of people's, I have a leg, I have a foot, a leg, and then the attachment on the leg. Okay, so if you are bending over, if you're going to go down on your knees, right? Or if you're going to go on your tiptoes to get something. Well, the ankle, you have ankles that flex. On a prosthetic, it does not flex. It's just a piece of wood or plastic or whatever. Well, they have ankles that flex, that get up and down and so forth. Now, if you want to get a prosthesis that's built with an angle so you can wear a pair of heels or something like that, you could do that. But just to be able to adjust your foot, especially on uneven ground, if you're walking across even somebody's yard, it's not going to be all smooth. There's going to be bumps and all that kind of stuff. And what happens is if you hit that bump, hole, whatever, the wrong way, then you kind of start losing your balance. But we don't get that. We don't get those kind of things that have been figured out and done as the norm. You have to either have a lot of money or some super duper insurance company that, whose premiums are sky high in order to get that.
Do you think that insurance companies overall have been a considerable obstacle?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I know that they had this thing going on a couple of years ago, and up in New York and so forth. I don't know if they repealed it or not, but the insurance companies were doing, one prosthesis per lifetime. Can you imagine that? I mean, what happens when your leg atrophies? What happens when your leg, you have diabetes or something and it gets swollen, I mean, it's crazy, one prosthesis per lifetime. What happens if you get one when you're 3 and now you're 18, I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. And they're always worried about the minorities, which I think is right, of, making sure that they've got equal opportunities and so forth and so on. Well, people with disabilities are minorities as well, and they need to be considered in the same light and carried along with the same concern as they do with everybody else.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So going off of, you mentioned insurance companies and then also legislation in general, I wanted to bring up the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, talk about how different levels of government approach disability. Are there any programs that you can think of which are more related to legislature or government that have benefited you?
Well, the problem is that some of these things are, the result of legislation and so forth, but I might not necessarily know that. I can tell you that there are several places, and I don't even think I know the names of them, that do try to come up with adaptable sports for people. We have over at, I think it's Gillespie Golf Course, they do adaptive golf, and they have things a couple times a month for people to go over there at no charge and golf and do various things and learn how to, you got to think about how do you golf with one arm, how do you golf with one leg, and how do you do the swing, and how do you get the body, and all those things that as a person that's whole, you never even consider the mechanics of your body. As a person with a disability, you have to understand the mechanics of your body, and you have to figure out a way around the mechanics of your body. And then there's adaptive tennis, wheelchair basketball. They have, of course, runs like 5K runs and things like that, and it's put on by, I'm afraid I don't know who they are. I think it has a lot to do with when they're connected to a resource like the Y, or some sort of place where you get a lot of ways to maneuver your body and so forth. Robin Waldron, who is the head of our amputee support group, she knows all of this stuff. She would be really the one to say the right things about where these things come from. I just know that different amputee support groups in different sections like Raleigh and Triangle and so forth will pass information back and forth so we can do it. Whether any of that is established by the government, I don't know. There may be grants, there may be something, I'm just not aware.
So you mentioned that different groups talk to each other and exchange information. Do you feel like there's a larger community than just individual cities?
Oh yeah. There is the Amputee Coalition, and they have an annual conference every single year. Not this year, but last year it was in Greensboro. And it's an amazing group. They have a magazine that comes out once a month called In Motion that is free to amputees. And you gotta, I don't have any idea how much it costs to publish that stuff and to put it all in the mail, but that's a huge donation to us. There's also a magazine called Amplitude that is just chock full of personal stories about people. When you read personal stories about how people have accomplished this or that, it encourages you, and it also gives you ideas on how to do things. In both of those magazines, there are different ads for different things that people with disabilities need. They're just really, really good resources. And the Amputee Coalition is a great place. They carry a list of amputee support groups if you send your information in, so that if somebody is like online looking at that, they can try to find one in their area. That's another way to do it. So I know of those two. Whether there's a Amputee Coalition and their conference is nationwide. So I do know of those.
So do you feel like you are fairly represented at a local and national level, and that could be legislatively, that could be through the community?
Well, I do know that legislatively, Amputee Coalition is in everything. They are in insurance, they are in, talking to the legislators about things. So we do have that group that does support us and help us as much as we can. I guess that part of it needs to be, all of us need to do our own grassroots. But then again, you got to know how to do it and who to talk to and all those kind of things. And you have to understand that when you first get an amputation, it takes a few years just to actually get back into the real world on your brain. And because you're so focused inward on how to survive and how to live and how to not be a whiner and all those other things, and also you have a lot of pain those first few years because you're adjusting, and so forth. So you get distracted and you turn inward instead of outward. So
if you were talking to the next generation, the younger generation, what would you want them to know about your experiences or disability or amputations in general?
Well, I think about my grandchildren, and I want them to know that people with amputations are just like anybody else, but that it is important for us to have, all of us have good insurance, and it's not the almighty dollar that should be running and forcing all this stuff. It should be knowing what really needs to be done. It's just, you just can't slash through budgets of insurances and stuff like that, saying, well, that costs too much money, so we're just going to take it out and all that. You just can't do that. And you have the same thing with prescriptions too. There's a lot of us that have to take prescriptions for whatever because of amputations. And if they're not on that tier, if they don't get on that tier for insurance and stuff like that, you have to pay a lot more, or you can't take it at all, and so forth. So I would like to have the next generation have some real understanding of what people with disabilities and people with different learning disabilities, all that, what they actually have to go through in life, and more so than just the regular person, and try to help them. Just like you have a baby and you have to help them how to walk and everything else and guide them through, and it's the same kind of thing. Because when we go into an amputation, the day before we had no idea, usually, that that's going to happen, and then there's this whole new outlook on your life, and so yeah, they need to have a place, a way for amputees and for disabilities and for all the other learning disabilities, a place to be able to go and get what they need.
How do you feel about the difference between small and large communities when it comes to resources available? So a small town compared to a city like Greensboro.
Well, I would say that the larger towns would have more options for people with disabilities. When you live in a smaller town, like I've lived in a couple of them in Massachusetts that were like 6,000 people and so forth, and if memory serves me correctly, you really would have to go to the next big town or whatever to attend meetings, or unless there was just like a big old group of people. But yeah, I think the larger communities have more to offer.
What would you emphasize to others who may not know much about people with disabilities?
They're just like you. They have some restrictions and some things that are harder for them to do than you to do. And you just need to be courteous. If you're walking down the street, you just need to be courteous, you don't run into them and things like that. But they're just, they're not any different. They've got brains and everything else. And some people are, I have met people with amputations that produce movies, that are athletes, professors, every kind of thing you can imagine. And it doesn't change anything except the way they maneuver. And we just have to know that. You need to have, they stopped smoking inside buildings several years ago. It used to be just a few, and then it was everything. And because of the health and safety of people. Well, it's the same thing with disabilities. They should have places in restaurants where you could push a wheelchair up to a table, or places in restaurants, if you're going in with crutches, where do you put your crutches, and just easy stuff like that.
Is there anything that you wish people would stop doing in reference to those with disabilities?
I don't know. Some people stare. They're gonna stare anyway. I can't think of anything that people are doing that really hurts people with disabilities.
What is the most surprising or unexpected experience you've had as a result of your amputation?
Well, the most surprising and unexpected experience for me is that I can't do every single thing I always used to do. I can do a modified version of most everything. but not every single thing, and that's kind of, I don't know. It just depends. I mean, I have a leg now I can move around on. I can at least take a walk once in a while, which I couldn't do before.
And is there anything else that you would like to bring up or discuss or emphasize?
Well, I have to say that I appreciate groups like you guys doing these kind of informational pieces that people can see, and see people that have disabilities and how they go about their life, you know. And there's a lot of people that are shut in because of their disabilities, and nobody even sees them or hears from them. So any light you shed on this is, I think, very important and very much appreciated by everybody.
I'm so glad. And again, we're so appreciative that you came in and interviewed with us.
Yeah.
It means a lot.